everyone, and welcome to another Northwoods Whispers ASMR video. For today's video, I'm particularly excited as I feel this video in many ways encapsulates the name of my channel, Northwoods Whispers, in that I am preparing to go on a spring turkey hunt. Our season is just about to get underway, and so I've been in the process of getting much of my gear together, some of it out of storage, and ready to embrace springtime, especially out in the freshly budding woods. So I thought for today's video I could show you some of what I tend to bring with me. Perhaps this will be educational, first-time experience for some of you, and hope it's informative and relaxing. So let's get underway. For the theme of the video, I decided to wear one of the jackets that I use when going hunting. As you can see, it's sort of a camouflage jacket, fits my surroundings here. Let's see what we have here. So I figured for starters, I could show you my rangefinder here. Obviously it comes in a camo pack as well, and I am dexterous enough to open this while simultaneously holding the microphone. Look at there. There we go. You can see here, this is what the rangefinder looks like, also in a camo color. Pretty simple to operate. It has an on-off switch here, as well as a mode. This really just changes between kilometers and yards. Being in America, we use yards, so I really only pull this out when I'm planning to set up shop, that is, put out a decoy or two, and I can scope it out to range based on where I plan on sitting and how far out. Normally this is somewhere between 30 and 40 yards of where I'd best like to get an opportunity to call in a male turkey. There are two types that we typically hunt. That is, bearded turkeys are the title for it. This can come in the form of male toms, that is the older turkeys, the ones that have the fan, and there's a second younger turkey known as Jake, both of which have beards, but what is less commonly known is that there are female turkeys which also have beards. So technically they would be legal, though usually for the springtime purposes everyone's trying to call in those big male gobbler turkeys. The sounds in the woods, when you really hear that sound, that's an adult male. And so to call in these turkeys, we use a variety of different options, and I'll be happy to share them with you. So for starters, say we're just about to get started in the day, and this could be early, 4 o'clock in the morning. Normally I might just sit, wait, and listen, see what's out there. And if I haven't heard anything by that first light hour around 5 or 5:30, I'll pull out one of these. And this is called a locator call. Normally I'd blow into this, but for the purposes of an ASMR video, it can get quite loud. But essentially you blow into the wide piece here, and you can see inside there's a little bit of a reed, much like a musical instrument, that vibrates and makes a sound. What it's trying to emulate is what is called a barred owl, and owls typically are making those calls very much also in the early morning, and so it matches quite well. You may have also heard this sound if you live in the, let's say, northeast. I believe it's along the entire eastern seaboard, but I for certain know northeastern United States. The classic "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" is what those owls sound like. And so, if I haven't heard anything yet, I might use that. And usually you're triggering what's called a shock gobble. That is, you get the animal to stir into making sound. It's almost instinctive as far as what they do. And that gives you a sense of where they might be and where you might want to get set up. So when you're getting set up, that is where you have several different options. I know that there are plenty of people who go out there with a number of calls, and I certainly do myself, but I also try to be a bit of a minimalist hunter. So the first few calls that I might do are this one here. This is called a box call. See if I can engage in some tapping sounds for you. Yeah, so the way that a box call works is that you have this side, which has been treated with usually a chalk substance, and it strikes against the ridges here. Just doing it lightly. Obviously that doesn't sound like very much like a turkey, and because so many of these things are meant to be loud, and I find that that's like pretty anti-ASMR. But essentially you would do this motion, and when you do it in the right cadence rhythm, you can really emulate female turkey, which is really what you're trying to go for. Spring turkey hunting is this common call and response, very Marco Polo, as far as games are concerned, of calling and getting a response. And in this case, we're trying to emulate female hens. And so it's essentially saying, hey, I'm here, it's springtime, let's get it on, essentially. And turkeys can be responsive to this. So another variety of call that I might get into are what are called pot calls or slate calls. And these calls are rounded objects, usually made of slate, ceramic, glass. And again, another way to sound off what a turkey might sound like. Even here alone, this piece is more like a piece of wood. You can hear this pencil-looking thing is called the striker, by the way, and you use the striker to knock against the slate call. And that's just me tapping, but in another way, this also will make you might see how making a sound like that it's more of a turkey purr rather than one is I'm usually going forward to say yelp, but that can also be effective. And they have two styles of this call. There was that one, and then there's one of a smaller nature, a little more low profile. But the same rules apply. You have a striker here. And so, see if I can do that. So, that's sort of what they would sound like. Obviously, you want to try to have your calls emulate as close as possible, because there is a significant difference between a turkey and a turkey caller. And once turkeys start really coming in, you get to the last type of call, which is called a diaphragm call. I have one here. And the diaphragm call actually goes in the mouth. Now, with this particular call, you can use a number of styles of calling. These are very versatile objects. And there are more than turkeys aren't the only animal that you can do call response form of hunting with. You might be able to do this with other wild game. And so these are very useful, not just for turkey hunting, but just generally in call response hunting in general. And so what happens is this goes in the roof of the mouth, right back there. And there's two layers of latex. I pulled this one out because I find that it's the easiest to sort of spot because it's got the two colors. See that color there, the blue, and then there's a yellow underneath. So there's two pieces of latex, and as air comes through and over the roof of the mouth, it will reverberate against here, making a sound. This one requires a little bit more finesse, and similar to some of the other calls, I don't want to try to do it without necessarily blowing anyone's ears off. So, it goes back there, sits on the top. So I'm pushing air through, and eventually that'll make the sound, but again, for the sake of anyone's ears tonight, I don't want to be too loud. So that's that. I've got a couple other calls as well. That one that I just showed you, though, has been my favorite and one that I've really been able to create the sounds that I'm going for. This is such an intricate game because the calls have different styles of cuts in the latex and different fits for the mouth, and so it can be a little bit trial and error, but much like practicing anything like whispering, or not whispering, whistling, it takes time, but when you figure out your own style to do it, it comes quite naturally, and so that's a very similar way of practicing. So the next thing I might want to talk about is the reason for camouflage, especially in spring hunting. So spring hunting is pretty unique from, say, hunting in the fall, because there are no other hunts that are currently on. And so it is the only time when wearing orange, bright orange, which is so common to see amongst hunters, is because there's no other big game hunting going on during the spring, so orange is not necessary, at least in a legal sense. It might still be recommended, just because if you're hunting on, say, public land, you might want to be like, hey, I'm here, don't shoot at me, right? But for the most part, what we're hunting is to know a little bit about the animal. And so when it comes to turkeys, their eyesight is really one of their greatest attributes. They have sight that is 3 times clearer than our 20/20 vision. And what we might know very clearly from our vision is that in a still space, movement is the thing that we notice first. And so, if you're in the woods, imagine that you're hunting this animal that can see movement at 3 times the perception that you can. And not only that, they have 270 degrees of visual range. So, this is where the camo comes into play, blending in with your surroundings and limiting your movement, even the blinking of your eyes, down to a minimum. And so, like I said from the beginning, I might be wearing this kind of jacket, but my hands wouldn't be exposed either. In fact, I might be wearing a set of gloves like these. So, if I were to take a second to put that on, so I would even go into the woods much like this, just geared up and ready to go. What else? Hang on. I also have with me here a head covering, so similar to the gloves. My face and usually, except for my eyes, but I sometimes will even put a mesh under here. So you can see the mouth is covered. But it's really the eyes that I try to cover as well. So I usually put some sort of film here. But that's the mask itself. I might just move back a second so you can see that in full. Just covered in the woods. As I'm showing you these things, you might think, they're different colors and patterns and not everything matches. Like, the jacket doesn't match the head covering, and that doesn't necessarily match the gloves. And that's kind of the point. As much as blending in is important, it's also important to remember that in nature, despite the many patterns that may exist, rarely is it ever sequential or patterned in a small region. So, if you are wearing, say, a full suit, that could stand out because it's all one piece, and so the part is blending into your environment. As if you've ever taken a walk in the woods, you can find that the scenery can change from one step to the next, and so having some variability in your camouflage, I have found anyway, helps to increase the advantages. So, what else do we have here? Yes. This is sort of the piece that puts everything together. This is my vest. I'll see if I can move out of the way briefly here to show you. So, equipped with a seat, this vest allows me to store the 2 box calls, the strikers, the 2 slate calls, the box call, the strikers, and the diaphragm calls that I showed you earlier. All nice in a compact, easy to access sort of space. And you might be wondering, Sean, why the seat? Well, I'll tell you this much. When it comes to hunting turkey, like I said, as far as their eyesight is concerned, minimizing movement is of the utmost importance. And so, this usually requires sitting. And I'm sure that there are plenty of people who have no trouble sitting along a tree and just hanging out, but I find that discomfort or alleviating discomfort in the ways that you can increases the duration for your tolerance to being out there. And so something as simple as a seat cushion hooked to a vest is such a relief for sitting for long periods of time. Same is true for staying dry. If you've ever been caught in rain and all of a sudden your shoes are awfully wet, just how uncomfortable that is and how quickly you want to get out of them. So again, increasing your duration for staying out there. What else do I have here? Yes, so I was talking about decoys earlier, and I have one here. Let's say hello to Henrietta. So this is my decoy. As you can see, the camera sort of picking up the blues on the head. Not actually this blue, although I do think it's pretty accurate for as far as when the sun hits. Maybe I'll move back here for a moment just so you can see her in full. So, she sits like this. There's a hole at the top where a spike will go in, and it's open on the bottom, so you can see there where the stake will go, and she'll sit, a couple inches off the ground, and the wind will sort of take her and move her. And you also have to bear in mind that I might be making calls every now and again, so she's out there about 30-40 yards away, and I'm working to call something in. What's nice about this type of decoy is that it's foldable, so again, goes right in the pack, and when I'm setting up, easy enough to pull out of the bag, get set up in less than a couple minutes, and be good to go. It can also be useful to maybe have a friend or two who will be joining you, as usually in the springtime, especially early in the springtime, having more than one can increase your chances because many of the female turkeys are out and about together in packs. So it can sometimes seem a little bit unusual to just have one sort of hanging out there alone that early in the season. So I find later on in the season having one or two makes more sense to those turkeys because many of the other females have been bred and may have even hatched off flocks. So that idea of numbers is something to keep in mind. And I suppose last but certainly not least is the weaponry used to acquire such game. So this is a shotgun hunt, and so I have with me here, in fact, give me a moment to break this gun. Okay. What I was doing there was I just wanted to break the gun to show you that there's nothing inside. This gun is unloaded, and the safety is always in the off position, or on position, rather. It has to be pushed off. So, this is a 12 gauge Franke Instinct LX. It is an over-under shotgun, which is slated for 2 3/4 inch, or 3/4 inch, or sorry, not 3/4, 3-inch shells, and it is an over-under, meaning that there are 2 barrels, as you can see there. 2 barrels, one at the top and one on the underside. And, yeah, so I find this gun to be a lot of fun. And although it's made in Italy, I do like the sort of historic almost look to it, especially with the engravings on it. You can see there's Bob White quail on one side and a set of mallards on the other. So the detailing of this is quite pretty. Weighs about 7, maybe a little under. So as far as walking with it, it can get a little bit tiresome. You always want to be mindful of the weight that you're carrying with you in the woods, but for these kinds of hunts, when I'm sitting and hanging out and calling, I do find that it's easy enough to blend in without stirring too much trouble. So, I'll see what more I can show of this. Try to hold it. It's pretty perfectly balanced in the center, right about this notch. So, holding it far from one side can feel a little heavy. So, that's that. You can see here a little bead on the end. Normally for other kinds of hunts it's less of a concern, though for this one I do like to use that for aiming. In other instances it might not necessarily be needed as such, but that might be for another video and another time. So I think that's all I have for today's video. Very excited for the upcoming hunt. And if you enjoyed this video, as always, please leave a like. Feel free to share any comments and questions you might have about this video. And as always, hitting the subscribe button is greatly appreciated. So, again, I thank you for being here, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk with you all real soon. Until then.